HDSLR Shooter. Sponsored by Akidio, Adamus, Band Pro, Blackmagic Design, Carl Zeiss, and Xylite.
Hi, Clint with HDSLR Shooter here at Camera House for the Band Pro event, announcing the C700 availability here at Camera House, and also with James Neihouse, ASC. And Band Pro sent you to north of Fairbanks to test out the C700. Talk a little bit about your experience.
Right. Well, I was in Fairbanks shooting a film with the C700, and because I was one of the first probably to use it on a production with the codecs with the 4K system, they asked me to come and help out on this little presentation and on the rollout of the camera here at the Camera House. So that's how I got here.
Now, talk a little bit about your background, essentially like the major space IMAX films that have come out since, what, 2000 or before then?
Before then. I've worked on all the IMAX space films that have been produced since 1984. So there's 7 of them in total. I've done most all the ground shooting. I've trained the astronauts to shoot in space. I don't get to fly, unfortunately. And on 7 of the films.
Kind of the drill on these things is that you shoot all of the ground stuff, and then you train the astronauts to shoot. How does that? Are they able to catch on pretty quick to run these cameras? Or?
Well, astronauts are probably the best students in the world. That's why they're astronauts. So they learn very quickly. As part of their Astronaut 101 training, they get basic camera operation. So they know what an f-stop is. They know which end of the lens to look through. So we don't have to go that basic. Then we jump in with shooting for IMAX, shooting for the big screen, how long to do a shot, how close to be on a shot, what to frame, how to frame, and then develop a scene list with them that is appropriate for our film and is appropriate for a visual sensibility in IMAX. You don't want it may be the greatest experiment in the world, but it all happens in a box that sits there. That's not very visual. So we try to get those bits and pieces from them during training as to what they're doing that will look good on an IMAX screen.
Now, the one that was narrated by Tom Cruise, that was the last one, right?
Tom Cruise narrated Space Station 3D, and that was actually 2 films ago. We've done Hubble 3D and A Beautiful Planet since then.
A Beautiful Planet. Talk a little bit about the camera systems that you guys were using on that one.
A Beautiful Planet was our first IMAX film shot in space totally digitally. We used the C500 and the Canon 1DC, it was a big departure for us, a little scary for the first time to be totally reliant on digital imaging, but the Canon cameras came through fine colors on that. I was very happy with the way they looked. We actually used the 1DC as a still camera, shooting sequential stills of the Earth, sort of time-lapse, but then used some of the secret sauce that IMAX uses for their digital remastering process to in between the frames and create full motion out of that 4 frame per second. So now we've got what looks like IMAX footage shot in space, but it's still images shot on a digital DSLR.
When they were shooting, were they transmitting those images back to Earth?
As the astronauts shot, they were able to downlink the files from the 1DC via their downlink system, the way NASA does all the time. The proxy files, the 1080 files from the C500, came down the same way. The 4K files, which it's a terabyte an hour, we flew those drives back on a SpaceX Dragon, so we actually got the physical drives back from space on that. But we had the proxies, so we knew what they shot.
I mean, that must have been a huge change of everything, to be able to know for sure that you got what you shot.
It was a big change. Usually, we'd have to wait for the film to come back from space, then it goes to the lab, then it gets printed, and then we look at it and decide what we've got. With this, we were, within 2 or 3 days, we knew what the astronauts had shot, which was good because they could say, okay, here, we just shot this shot, see if you like it, it's coming down, and we could email with them. They could actually call us on the cell phone would ring and it'd be space station, which is kind of cool. And they'd say, hey, we just shot this. What do you think about it? Or we want to shoot this shot. How should we do it? And That's a lot of what I did for a year and a half was sit with my cell phone glued to my ear waiting for them to call.
That's amazing. Now, in this particular shoot that you did, this was the first experience with the C700 and the new sensor?
Right. I was really happy with this new camera, with the C700. I'd seen what it could do from some of the early tests that Canon had shot with it, and I knew it was going to be a good low light camera, and I knew it was going to have 4.5K capability. I've been happy with color science from Canon all along with the C500, even going back to the 1G, the HDR or the HDV camera. We use that a little on Hubble. I knew their color and I knew their look, and I just wanted this camera up there just to see what it could do. And this was the ultimate low light test for any camera. I mean, you're shooting the Aurora Borealis, which is at night and kind of fluorescently glowing stuff in the sky, and that's your only illumination.
Now, I know we can't share any of the footage right now, but one of the shots that you showed to demonstrate the RAW was just a gray file. It looked like nothing there, and then but all of the information was there of the Aurora and I guess a rocket, right?
Right. That was one of the RAW files from one of our still images. I misjudged the brightness of the rocket because I'd never shot one of these sounding rockets before. I've shot shuttles and all sorts of other rockets, but never one of these, and sure hadn't shot one in a snow-filled environment. I mean, there's snow everywhere in Alaska. So I misjudged the exposure a bit. I got looked at the image and I'm going like, wow, it's totally washed out. There's nothing there. And then I put it in Photoshop and started playing with the exposure, and all of a sudden I'm looking at Aurora and detail on the ground, and the raw capabilities of these cameras is just amazing. And that's really, especially when you're turning the camera over to a space crew that are not professional, quote-unquote photographers, that there's a lot of comfort knowing that you've got a raw image that you can play with back and forth, and that you can recover from some of these, little exposure errors they might make.
In this particular case, for the C700, talk a little bit about your experience, though. How did you feel about it?
I like the camera. With the codex recorder on the back, it's very balanced. It's easy to work with. It's light. The first time I picked it up, I nearly tossed it over my shoulder, over the top of my head, because I thought it was going to be Alexa sort of heavy, but it's much lighter. It's only 7.5 pounds or something like that. Which, if you're shooting for a full day with a thing on your shoulder, chasing people around wherever, that's a big deal. So the lighter the camera, the better. It's very user-friendly, just like all the previous Canon cameras have been. In fact, if you know the Alexa menu and if you know the Canon menus, it's going to be very familiar ground for anybody who's just stepping into this thing for the first time. The buttons, they're all in the right places. They can all be programmed. It can be so user-friendly. This new electronic viewfinder, the OLED, 1920 1080 viewfinder on the camera is just beautiful. Focused, lets you focus really well. It's got a great zoom function on it. I mean, I can go on and on and on about what I liked about this camera.
So, talk a little bit about that sensor, though, the Super 35 sensor. How'd you feel about it?
Canon does something with these sensors that's different from everybody else. I don't know what it is, but I feel personally that it has a much more cinematic look than any of the cameras, including the Alexa. Whether it's the way they pull the data off the sensor or something they're doing inside the pre-processing, I don't know. But what I do know is that I just like the way it looks. The color science, the skin tones are amazing. The way it handles highlights and the way it works in low light. It just, I don't know. And the fact now that you can actually do anamorphic on this camera, I think is a big deal. People, I think, have stayed away from Canon products trying to do anamorphic, and now they don't have any reason not to, because it's got the capability.
Do you think there's an opportunity that one of these might go up one day?
If I were going to fly a camera within the next 2 or 3 years, it would definitely be the C700.
If you want to rent the camera, you can go to Film House in North Hollywood, and we'll put the website on the in the story. Or to purchase, go to bandpro.com.
HDSLR Shooter, sponsored by Akidio, Adamus, Band Pro, Blackmagic Design, Carl Zeiss, and Xylite.